Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And this is a special episode. It is the 100th episode of this series. Hard to imagine how much time I have dumped into OOTP over the last several months, but thank you for those of you who have been loyal viewers. Thank you to those of you who are new viewers. If you're not subscribed to the channel, would appreciate if you subscribe. Like our videos, share your thoughts in the comments down below. Always interesting to hear what people think of what we're doing, whether it is good or bad. And there's been mostly good this year for the Buffalo Wings. We're just past the trade deadline, August 1st, 2034, and a 76-30 record on pace to tie the early 1900s Chicago Cubs and the 2001 Seattle Mariners with 116 wins in a regular season. We rank second in the National League in runs scored, first in the National League in runs against. You can see we have really broken away from the pack starting in May in the National League. And other than the Expos, the rest of the league, second through seventh in the division, are all closer to one another than they are to our Buffalo Wings. So in this 100th episode, the goal is to certainly get this team to well over 100 wins. With 2 months left in the season, our goal is to maintain the best record in baseball, so we will have home field advantage for as long as we're alive in the playoffs. And then it's also to avoid any significant injuries. Right now, the young center fielder Tim Gaglia, who we were extra cautious with, is on the IL. Other than that, we are really healthy. We ended up making 5 trades in July that we think will help our team. Big one was bringing on Alexis Barajas from the Marlins as our potential ace for hopefully this season and many years to come. We added an excellent right-handed reliever in Marco Jimenez, added an excellent left-handed reliever in Juan Veliz. We added a proven veteran bat for the outfield in Joey Moore, who was in his last year with the Red Sox. And then last and possibly least, we also made a trade for some infield depth with Chris Dillard, who is down in the minors learning how to play second and third more proficiently. We think there is a real chance that he will end up on the playoff roster for us as a potential late inning defensive replacement if he comes along well in his ability to learn those last couple positions. Right now, we've had the young Alejandro Mercado, Rule 5 pick on our roster all season long because we do think there is some value in Mr. Mercado, but he is not quite ready for the majors, although he is hitting .254 in the 59 at-bats that he's had, but certainly think that Mercado's spot on the playoff roster is definitely in jeopardy, and that's part of the reason we brought Dillard on board. As we talked about in our last episode, though, the youngster Steve Anderson, one of the top prospects in our system, first-round pick from back in 2030, has done well, 37 combined home runs in AA and AAA for us this year. He is also very good defensively. His bat is developing. It's reasonable to suspect that the role we have for Dillard in the playoffs could end up being occupied by Steve Anderson. And with Cam Collier being in the final year of his contract and looking for big money, tend to think that there's going to be a pretty important role for Mr. Anderson on the major league team in Buffalo next season, if not the last several weeks of this 2034 season. But this 2034 season is what we are really focused on. Like I said, the goal is to maintain the best record in baseball, and we at this point are 9.5 games better than the Seattle Mariners for the best record in baseball, so certainly hope that we do that. Second goal, and just as important, is to ensure that the team is as healthy as possible for the playoffs. And then the third goal, which is less important than the other two, is to see if we can chase history and potentially put up 116 wins to tie us with those '06 Cubs and those '01 Mariners. And we will see the progress we make on those goals over the rest of this episode. And we've simmed ahead to mid-August, things going pretty well, as you would expect for the Buffalo Wings. We split the first two games in the month with the Dodgers, but that meant we still took that series 2-3, 2 out of 3. We took 2 out of 3 in Montreal. We took 2 out of 3 in Washington, and then just came back home where we swept the Marlins. Rest of the month, we've got 3 at the Angels. Then we have a nice long homestand, 3 against Cleveland, 4 against Pittsburgh, and 3 against the Nationals. And then we will finish up the month on the road in Atlanta with 3 games against the Braves. Taking a look at the standings, winning percentage still basically right on target for that 116 wins. The Mariners are 75-43, so we are still 9.5 up on them for the best record in baseball, and 17.5 games up on the Philadelphia Phillies for the National League East. Only August 14th, and our magic number is down to 28. So we could be clinching this in early September if everything goes well, at least as far as the NL East. And we finally lost a series. We did take 2 out of 3 on the road at the Angels, but we lost 2 out of 3 at the beginning of the long homestand against the Cleveland Guardians. So it's amazing, but a 500 record does take us right off of the pace to get to those 116 wins. Still obviously going to be dependent on what we do down the stretch, but fading a little bit, which is kind of scary when you've lost one series and you're 3 weeks into the month, you've only lost one series in the month, and you're losing ground on what you need to accomplish. It's a good sign that your team is having a pretty good season. And fortunately, we bounced back with a great week, took 3 out of 4 at home against Pittsburgh, swept a 3-game series against the Nationals, so back on the road to Atlanta to finish off the month. Taking a look at the standings, winning percentage kind of right where it needs to be to get to those 116 wins, 93-37 record here, 130 games into the season with 32 games to go. Magic number down to 14, up 18.5 on the Phillies for the division title, and we are up 10 on the Royals now rather than the Mariners for the best record in baseball. The Mariners lost 6 in a row, 3-7 in their last 10, and the Royals have moved past them for the best record in the American League. Taking a look at the leaderboard, since we haven't checked in yet this episode. Big free agent acquisition, Shamar Jenneret, third in the NL in home runs. Leading in ribbies, Bobby Bolig is tied for second. Deshaun Seifu with 61 steals leading the league. Jenneret third in the National League in OPS. Jorge Carrillo and the new addition Alexis Barajas are 1-2 in earned run average. And just so you know, these guys are not as incredible as they look as I'm flashing them up. They're great players, but I was working on my minor league system, so those ratings were relative to the IL, if you were wondering. Carrillo running away with the National League lead in wins with 18. Barajas is tied for second. So continue to have a number of players on our Buffalo Wings all over the leaderboards. As we've talked about, just want to stay healthy. And hopefully when we get to September roster expansion on the 1st in a few days, that'll help us bring up a couple extra players to ensure that our team remains healthy and well. And we've made it to September 1st. We did take 2 out of 3 in Atlanta, although we lost the final game of the series. 19.5 up on the Phillies at this point. Our 714 winning percentage as we enter the final month of the season has us on pace for 115 and 2/3 wins. So if we get lucky and win that little bit of an extra game, we will get to 116. The Royals continue to lead the Mariners now, but we are 11 games up on the Royals for the best record in baseball. So just a matter of clinching things and staying healthy at this point. The magic number is down to 10, so would like to think there is a decent chance that over the next week or so we will get the division clinched, which is the first step in what we need to do. Our 95-38 record, 5 games above Pythagorean expectations. We had over a 700 winning percentage in August. The sad thing is a 700 winning percentage, and we're actually losing ground on that 116 win target, which magnifies just how difficult that is. We are still second in the National League in runs scored. You can see we are first or second in every offensive category except for home runs, where we're 10th, even with the addition of Jenneret this year. But everything else, we are at the top of the league or in second. Not all that different when you think about our pitching. First in the National League in runs allowed. You can see we are in the top handful in just about every category except 7th in BABIP, 8th in strikeouts, and still a middle-of-the-pack team in terms of our defensive efficiency. I do think we can potentially help that a little bit if we decide to bring up a Dillard or an Anderson to potentially help us defensively over this last month of the season. Nate Kimmel, who we sent down when ultimately Gaglia came back from being injured, given the acquisition of Joey Moore, would be the obvious guy to bring up. He's hitting .333 in Albany. As we talked about many times in previous episodes, he doesn't have anything left to prove at that level. But I do think that potentially a Steve Anderson or a Chris Dillard could help us more. The issue is Dillard is a 31-year-old, really hasn't done too much improving in his ability to play second recently. Anderson, the youngster, is pretty proficient at all 3 positions at this point, and I think he's potentially got a better bat than Mr. Dillard. So there is a part of me that's leaning towards getting Anderson a little bit of experience over the next month or so if he conceivably could end up on our playoff roster, which I think is very realistic given that just looking at the ratings, he is a better player than Mercado, although as I've talked about many times, in the limited action Mercado has gotten, he's handled himself reasonably well for a 22-year-old who had to jump all the way from rookie ball to the majors for us to keep him as a Rule 5 acquisition. And also wanted to note that Juan Estrada was named the #1 starter in the National League for the month of August, 5-0 record with a 1.86 ERA. Estrada, for those of you familiar with us, is a two-way guy, bouncing back from an injury-plagued 2033 with a 13-4 record, 2.97 ERA, and better than a strikeout per inning for us as a starter this year. And he's also, despite not having a ton of power, a pretty proficient hitter, hitting .306 for us this year with his first home run. He's decent at drawing walks, 29 walks while having 245 at-bats. So his on-base percentage is close to .380, 131 WRC plus, and another win and a half above replacement as an everyday player. So Estrada with a good month, and in our effort we want to win 116 games. We would love to get this team into the record books from that perspective, but we're trying to be rational and reasonable about what we want with this team, and what we really want is this team to remain healthy, and ultimately win it all in the playoffs. So we are actually going to go to a six-man rotation. We just brought up Isidro Ochoa, the young starter who's split the season, actually split the last few seasons between Albany and the majors. Came up and he pitched game 162 for us each of the last 2 years when we were resting people for the playoffs. With the additions we've made to our pitching staff and the fact that he got off to a less than impressive start as a starter for us this year in the majors, he ended up losing his spot in the rotation and then ended up down in the minors in Albany when we made some of those additions that we talked about closing in on the trade deadline, and we got some people healthy. But we are going to put Ochoa into the sixth spot in the rotation. It may cost the likes of Carrillo an ERA title. It's not going to cost Carrillo leading the league in wins, but again, the goal is to put as little stress as possible on our pitchers, particularly Shazier, Barajas, Estrada, and Carrillo, who will likely be the four that will go within the playoffs and will move Susana into the incredible bullpen that we have going here. But over the next month, just want as little stress as possible on the starters. Try to do everything we can to ensure they remain healthy. So we're going to move to a six-man rotation, knowing that it could cost us a chance at maybe winning 116 games by pitching Ochoa 4 or 5 times over the next few weeks rather than guys who are better than him. But if it ensures that our top 4 pitchers and hopefully the entire pitching staff is healthy when we get to the playoffs, I think it will be worth it. And as far as the everyday players, we did decide to bring up Steve Anderson, the youngster, and given his really good infield range, we are going to platoon him with Tim Hull, and given that Anderson is a left-handed hitter, Anderson is going to be our shortstop against right-handed pitching down the stretch. We'll see what he can do in terms of handling major league pitching. Hull, who is having a fine year for us, kind of is what he is, 250 hitter with a little pop in his bat. Not quite as good as he's been in previous seasons in terms of his WAR. In a perfect world, I think maybe he'd be more of a platoon guy for us going forward, particularly if we decide that Anderson brings more to the table, both offensively and defensively. But right now we are going to set the two of them up to play a platoon at shortstop, ensure that Anderson gets a little bit of major league experience before we potentially ask him to contribute to this team in the playoffs. One other change, we are letting Andres Medina go as our starting catcher against both lefties and righties ahead of Rutschman. Rutschman has still been better offensively this year. Medina hitting 233 with 5 homers and 146 at-bats, a little bit above replacement despite his 77 WRC plus, thanks to the good defense. Rutschman has been the starter most of the year, and he's had a respectable season, league average in terms of his WRC plus, a WAR of almost 2, still slightly above average defensively, hitting 252, 13 doubles, 6 homers. He is certainly slowing down here in his age 36 season. The future for us at catcher is certainly Medina, whether as a starter next year or a backup is uncertain, but want to give him a little more playing time over this last month of the season just to see exactly what we may have or not have in terms of Mr. Medina. And after losing the first 2 games against the Astros to start off the month of September, we did win the final game of the series, and at 96-40, we've clinched ourselves a spot in the postseason, although we are now once again off pace to get to 116 wins. Just shows you how tenuous going for a mark like that really is. Taking a look at the team schedule for the week ahead, we've got 3 at home against the Twins and 3 at home against the Diamondbacks. The Twins are a 63-74 team, and the Diamondbacks are a 63-73 team. So would tend to think that honestly, winning 2 out of 3 in each of those series is what we'd want to do and what we'd expect to do. But as we've talked about in previous episodes, with the goal that we have, or the opportunity we have to get to 116 wins, winning 2 out of 3 just isn't enough. We really probably need to win 5 of 6 against those teams this upcoming week to get ourselves on pace to potentially get to those 116 wins. And as if I am some type of seer, we did win 5 out of 6 against the Twins and the Diamondbacks. Officially claimed the National League East crown for a 3rd consecutive season today. So good to have that wrapped up. 20.5 up on the Phillies. We are 101 and 41. Kansas City is now clearly the 2nd best team in baseball, and we are up 12 on them for the best record in baseball. So certainly in a pretty good position to hopefully ensure that we will have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. We've definitely tailed off a little bit, even winning 5 of 6 in terms of getting to 116 wins. But as I've talked about, that is a secondary goal compared to the primary goals, which were clinching home field advantage for the playoffs and keeping this team healthy as we head into the playoffs. And right now, with 3 weeks left in the season, we're on pace to certainly clinch the best record in baseball, probably within the next 2 weeks. And then after that, it's just a matter of hopefully keeping this team healthy down the stretch. Have a really long road trip the next 2 weeks. 3 at the Cardinals, 3 at the Padres, 4 at the Marlins, and then 3 at the Phillies before we come home to Buffalo to finish off the season with 4 against Montreal and then 3 against the New York Mets. And we just finished up a 500 week, which normally on the road is perfectly acceptable. But when you're chasing a legendary season, it's not going to get us there. We took 2 out of 3 in St. Louis before dropping 2 out of 3 in San Diego. As I mentioned, we've got 7 more on this road trip against the Marlins and then the Phillies before we will get to the final homestand of the season. Taking a look at the standings, the record is 104 and 44. So to get to 116, pretty simple math tells me we're going to need to go 12 and 2 or better down the stretch. So that is going to be quite a challenge for us. We're up 10 games on Kansas City for the best record in baseball, so hopefully getting close to finishing that. You may remember we won 104 last year. I believe that's the best season in Buffalo Wings history at 104 and 58. We also won 101 games back in 2028. So unless we lose our last 14 games of the season, we will break the record for most wins by a Buffalo Wings team in the coming days. 22 up on the Mets. The Phillies have dipped down to 3rd. Miami is in 4th, 26.5. The Phillies up 4 on a wild card, and Miami is actually tied with the Rockies for the 3rd and 4th wild cards in a pretty good race with Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and the Cubs for those last 2 wild card spots. So the teams that we are playing against are playing for playoff spots and or playoff seeding. We'll see what we can do against them this week. And we lost 2 of the first 3 to Miami, so at this point we would need to be perfect in our final 11 games of the season to be able to match the Cubs and the Mariners at 116 wins. So clearly not expecting that, even though we have had a couple of long win streaks this year. I know we hit a 17-game win streak, and then I can't remember whether the second one, when that broke, was also 11. Yeah, we did have the 17-game win streak, and then we lost a couple games, and then we had, following that, a 12-game win streak. So it would not be unprecedented for that to happen, but again, that is a secondary goal. Did just have a minor injury. Hopefully, that's the only injury I'll be talking about with you in these final weeks of the season. The young shortstop Steve Anderson, day to day with back stiffness. He's hitting 279 with 4 doubles and a home run in his first 43 at bats. Has been an above replacement level player. Pretty solid offensive player for us. So I think there's definitely a chance that Anderson will be getting some pretty significant playing time in the playoffs. Hull has been a less proficient offensive player this year, and only a win above replacement level at this point. Looking at their gloves and their bats, although Anderson is not an established major leaguer quite yet, you could certainly argue that you would prefer. You can certainly argue it would be nice if I could speak properly. I think I can certainly argue that Anderson's bat is better than Hull's. And I think just looking at the ratings, it's pretty clear that you would prefer his glove to Hull's. So I think a platoon with the two of them may be the way to continue going, although presumably we'll give Hull a little more playing time the next few days. We'll rest Anderson, even though it's not going to have a huge impact, just to hopefully ensure that we do not run into a situation where we have any long-term issues. And we are somehow frighteningly playing our worst baseball of the season as we close towards the end of this season. We split 2 out of 4 in Miami, and then we were swept on the road in Philadelphia. So the record stands at 106-49 with 7 games to go. Best case scenario now is 113 wins, which would even put us behind the 1998 Yankees if everything went perfectly. Would love to get over 110. If we get to 110, that means we have a winning record on this final homestand of the regular season. Hopefully feeling pretty good about the team as we head into the playoffs. But right now you can see we are 3-7 in our last 10, still up 18.5 on the Mets and 20 on the Phillies. And we are up 9 games on the Royals for the best record in baseball. So with only 7 games to go, obviously we have clinched that as well. A few battles here. Heiner is 3rd in the National League in batting average after being Rookie of the Year last year, having an even better season this year, but not going to win a batting title. 24 points behind Jonathan Sanders. Jenneret 2nd in homers. Jenneret leading the league in ribbies. Seifu leading the league in steals. Seifu now tied for 2nd in batter war. Jorge Carrillo 2nd in earned run average. Carrillo with 20 wins will lead the National League. So it's been a great season. At this point, just need to remain healthy over these final 7 games. And we did just win the first game of the final homestand against the Expos. Steve Anderson, the recent promotion, was chosen as the Eastern League's best player, even though he split the year between AA Utica and AAA Albany, hitting 235 now in his first 51 at-bats, still a bit above replacement level, but not hitting as well as he started off, but still going to be in, I think, a battle with Tim Hull for who should get the playing time there in the playoffs. And I think I may have misspoken there on Anderson, or at least I misspoke in my mind. I think I was kind of trying to say that he was named the International League Player of the Year in AAA with Albany. He was actually named the Eastern League Player of the Year, AA for Utica, 318 and 30 homers and 258 at-bats. While playing a very high-quality shortstop will do that for you. And we swept the last-place Expos, allowed them just 3 runs over the 4 games at home. So that's gotten us to 110 wins. 3 left now against the Mets. The goal is just to remain healthy. The Mets look like they've got a 3-game lead on the Phillies for the number one wild card spot. So the Mets, I guess, have a tiny bit to play for at this point, but I don't think either team is going to be laying it all out in the field. The goal is to just remain healthy at this point. 112 and 50 would certainly be a nice round number for our number of losses. If we can get 2 out of these 3 against the Mets, and more importantly, have no significant injuries, I'll view that as a pretty successful conclusion to this regular season. And we've made it to game 162, split the first 2 with the Mets, so need to win today to get to 112 wins on the season. Our ace, Sincere Shazier, was set to go today. We are not going to risk him getting injured. The difference between 111 and 112 wins is not that exciting to us. Instead, we have brought up the final original Buffalo wing, Sean Sullivan, who has split the year between Albany and Buffalo. Obviously, the AAA season is long over, so he is well rested. And although he's probably not going to be on the playoff roster, gives Sullivan an opportunity to hopefully get a W for us this final game of the year. And we did get a 7-2 victory. Sullivan pitched well enough to win, 6 hits and 3 walks scattered over 5 2/3 innings, but only allowed 2 runs when all was said and done. But the workhorse from the bullpen, Lauren Walborn, who had a crazy year for us, led the league with 87 games pitched, 33 holds, 150 1/3 innings out of the bullpen, more than a strikeout per inning. 2.16 ERA, 4.7 WAR on the season. Even though he was not the closer for us, was clearly our most valuable arm in the bullpen. Made the big trade with the Dodgers last offseason. Thought that we really needed to bolster the bullpen, and Walborn did a good job of that. Improved his record on the year to 12-5. So the regular season is over. Our Buffalo Wings at 112 and 50, 9 games better than the Kansas City Royals for the best record in baseball, 20 games ahead of the New York Mets here in the National League East. Quick look at the leaderboard. Heiner ends up hitting 320 in his sophomore season. Rookie of the Year a year ago, a 2-time All-Star at this point for the first-round draft pick of ours at the end of the 2032 first round. Jenna Rhett doesn't repeat leading the league in homers and ribbies like he did last year in the American League, but still a really nice season for him, his first year with our team. 39 home runs, easily leads our Buffalo Wings, led the league with 125 ribbies, hit over 300, 4.6 WAR, 146 WRC plus. Got the type of season out of Jenna Rhett that we had hoped for. Deshaun Seifu had perhaps the most vintage Deshaun Seifu season of his career. Led the National League in steals for a 7th consecutive season. Led the league in triples for the 4th time in his career. Also led the league in doubles for the 1st time in his career. Led the league in hits for the 3rd time. Led the league in at-bats for the 3rd time. His 108 runs did not lead the league, but a 6.2 WAR, second best season in terms of WAR of Seifu's career. I feel like he's really had an underrated career. You look at the amount of red type, I guess we would call it, in OOTP, and for him to only be a 2-time All-Star and a 1-time Silver Slugger is a little bit disappointing. Clearly, the voters are not focused on guys who don't hit a lot of home runs, but at this point he is a regular 300 hitter, hit 315 on the year, 295 batting average for his career. I would hope that a year in which he led the league in hits, doubles, and triples while hitting 315 would get him some serious consideration for a second Silver Slugger award, but I won't hold my breath waiting for it. And obviously, he remains the premier threat in baseball on the base paths. Over 600 stolen bases in his career now, exactly 100 triples. As we've talked about, I think he can get to the point where Ricky Henderson is the only player who's stolen more bases than Seifu when Seifu is all done. And players who have lived in my lifetime that I've watched, Seifu definitely has a chance getting by Willie Wilson for most triples of any player I've ever seen. He could possibly get by Roberto Clemente of most triples for any player who played while I was alive, although I was a baby when Clemente last played. And there's still an outside chance he could also get by Stan Musial for the most triples of anyone who's actually been alive while I've been alive, even though he wasn't playing. So Seifu has a chance for a very interesting career. Probably not going to get voted into the Hall of Fame the way the voting in this game goes because of the fact that he's not going to have a ton of all-stars and silver sluggers because of the way the voting goes for those. But still happy with what Seifu's done as a number one overall pick for us. Second in the National League in batter WAR this year. Carrillo second in ERA, leads the league with 21 wins. So now it is just a matter of seeing what this Buffalo Wings team can do in the playoffs. We are back in the playoffs for a 7th consecutive season. Best record in baseball, going to have home field advantage as long as we are alive. We've made it to the NLCS 3 times, never even made it to a World Series. Certainly the goal this year is to win it all. That has been the goal the entire season. We'll find out what type of progress we make towards finally, hopefully, getting these Buffalo Wings a World Series championship in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.